Charles Whittaker had not spoken his wife's birthday out loud in 11 years. April 17. He still remembered it. The date lived inside him like old pain, quiet and precise, waiting for certain mornings to hurt again. That morning, the bank asked him to enter it. 4 digits on a cold keypad outside a private vault no one had opened since Eleanor died. Charles stood in his dark suit, thinking of the last time his wife had worn white lace, back when April 17 had been a celebration instead of a code. Then a boy behind him whispered, "Don't press it." Charles turned. The Shoeshine boy from the lobby stood near the velvet rope, his polish box at his feet, his face pale under the bank lights. "What did you say?" Charles asked. "The code already worked once today," the boy said. The bank manager's expression tightened. Charles looked at her. "Is that true?" "Impossible," she answered too quickly. "This box requires your authorization." The boy stepped closer before the guard could stop him. "I saw your brother come out of that hallway," he said. "I was polishing shoes near the mirror. He kept wiping his fingers with a handkerchief. White, with blue stitching." Charles knew that handkerchief. Adrian carried one every day. For a moment, Charles heard only the hum behind the vault wall. Then, after Charles entered the code, the manager added her override key. The steel door opened. Inside, on a shelf Eleanor had paid for and never told him about, lay a brass key tied with torn wedding lace, an empty envelope, and a photograph of Eleanor holding a child whose face had been nearly scratched away. Charles stared at it, not because he understood, because Eleanor had left him a secret, and whoever had arrived first had known exactly what she wanted him to find. The bank manager said nothing for 3 seconds. For a woman trained to make millionaires feel safe, it was almost a confession. Her name was Celia Mercer. Charles knew it from the polished brass nameplate on her desk and from the careful emails she had sent over the years, though he could not remember ever looking directly at her face until now. She was composed, silver-haired, and dressed in a navy suit that made caution look like virtue. "Mr. Whittaker," she said, "I think we should step into a private room." Charles did not move. The vault shelf was narrow, almost bare. The brass key lay on the torn lace, as if someone had placed it there with 2 careful fingers. The empty envelope had a crease down the middle and a faint rectangular mark inside, the ghost of whatever had been taken. The photograph was smaller than his palm. Eleanor was in it. Not the Eleanor from hospital rooms or anniversary portraits, but a younger Eleanor with wind in her hair and a smile Charles had not seen in the last years of her life. She was kneeling beside a child in a red sweater. The girl's face had been scratched with something sharp, not enough to destroy the image, only enough to make recognition impossible. Charles felt an unwelcome thought move through him. What else had Eleanor learned to hide from him? Behind him, the security guard kept one hand near the Shoeshine boy's shoulder. "Don't touch him," Charles said. The guard's hand dropped. The boy looked surprised, as if adults with expensive watches did not usually notice where guards put their hands. "What's your name?" Charles asked. "Ellis," the boy said. "Ellis Cole. How old are you?" 12. "And you saw my brother come from this hallway?" Ellis nodded once. He came out fast, but not running, like someone trying to look normal. He had his hand in his jacket. Celia's voice cooled. "Mr. Whittaker, this child is not authorized to be in any client area. Anything he thinks he saw from the lobby cannot be treated as reliable bank information." "He wasn't in the client area," Charles said. "He was near the mirror." Ellis blinked. Charles had heard the detail. More importantly, he had believed it enough to repeat it. Celia's mouth tightened. Before she could answer, a man's voice came from behind them. "Charles?" Adrian Whittaker stood at the entrance to the vault corridor, with a paper coffee cup in one hand and concern arranged perfectly across his face. He was 9 years younger than Charles, though people often guessed less. Adrian had the smoothness of a man who never had to push a door open. Someone always did it first. "I came back when Celia texted," Adrian said. "Is something wrong?" Charles looked at the white handkerchief folded in Adrian's breast pocket. Blue stitching along the edge. A family habit, Adrian used to call it. Their father had carried one. Charles never had. "You were in the lobby," Charles said. "I was." Adrian glanced at Ellis, then at Celia. "Mostly." "Mostly?" "I stepped away to take a call." Adrian smiled gently. "You know how these places are. No reception where you need it, too much reception where you don't." It was a good answer. Too good, maybe. Adrian had built a life out of answers that made questions feel impolite. Charles turned back to the vault. Eleanor had never liked Adrian. She had never said it plainly. But Charles remembered the way she closed her checkbook when Adrian entered a room, the way she stopped discussing charity accounts at family dinners, the way she once told Charles, "Your brother believes anything private is just something he has not been invited to yet." Charles had laughed then. He had been tired. There had always been another merger, another lawsuit, another call from London at midnight. Eleanor handled the human parts of their life because Charles handled the money that funded them. That had sounded like partnership. Now, inside a bank vault his wife had rented without telling him, it sounded like absence. "Celia," Charles said, "I want the access log for this vault." Her answer came too quickly. "Of course. We can prepare a formal request. Now, that is not how our process works. Then call whoever owns the process." Adrian stepped closer. "Charles, let's slow down. You're upset. I would be, too. Eleanor's things, don't use her name to lower my voice." The words surprised even Charles. Ellis looked down at his Shoeshine box, but Charles could tell the boy was listening harder now. Adrian's expression softened, one of his sharper tools. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "I know," Charles replied. He picked up the photograph by its edges. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, was a line so small he nearly missed it. "If he asks first, don't let him choose for her." Charles read it twice. He did not ask who he was. Not yet. He looked at Adrian instead, and for the first time that morning, his brother stopped smiling. Charles did not let Adrian touch the photograph. He laid it on the leather folder and placed his palm beside it, close enough to make the boundary clear. Adrian saw it anyway. "Charles," he said, "we should not do this in a hallway." "For once," Charles replied, "I agree." Celia led them to a consultation room with frosted glass walls, a walnut table, and a blurred view of the lobby. Ellis was told to wait outside. Charles looked at the guard and said, "He comes in." Celia's smile thinned. "Mr. Whitaker, that would be unusual. So is opening my wife's vault and finding an empty envelope." No one argued. Ellis entered with his polish box held in both hands. He chose the chair closest to the door and sat on its edge, as if ready to apologize for taking up space. Charles noticed the habit. Men like him expected chairs to be waiting. Boys like Ellis entered rooms already planning where they would stand if told to leave. Celia opened a tablet. "The vault has not been accessed by an unauthorized party." "That isn't what I asked," Charles said. "I asked for the access log. The log must be requested through our client services department. Then request it. I can begin that process." "Begin it loudly." Adrian folded his hands. "Charles, you are turning a confusing family matter into an accusation." "Good," Charles said. "Then everyone will understand me." Ellis almost smiled. He stopped himself, but Charles saw it. Celia excused herself to make calls. When she left, Adrian lowered his voice. "You do realize how this looks," he said. "A child from the lobby says something dramatic, and suddenly you distrust the people protecting Eleanor's accounts." Charles looked at him. Protected them from whom? Adrian let the question pass over him. From confusion, from emotion, from exactly this. The word emotion landed where it was meant to. Charles had heard it before, always delivered as concern. After Eleanor died, Adrian had used it to take over condolence calls, estate paperwork, charity renewals, even letters Charles could not answer. Charles had been grateful. Gratitude could be a door, and sometimes a man could lock himself outside with it. He turned to Ellis. "Tell me again what you saw." Slowly, Ellis glanced at Adrian. "Look at me," Charles said. "Not him." Ellis swallowed. "I was polishing Mr. Bowman's shoes by the mirror, the tall mirror near the plant. I know it. I saw Mr. Adrian in the mirror first, not straight on. In the reflection, he came from the vault hallway. He had his jacket pulled closed, like this." Ellis pressed an arm against his ribs. Then he took out the handkerchief and rubbed his fingers. "Not like cleaning coffee. Like trying to get something off." "What kind of something?" "I don't know." Ellis looked embarrassed by the honesty. "Maybe dust, maybe metal." The cloth caught on his ring. Adrian looked down at his right hand. No ring. Ellis saw the movement and went pale. "I mean earlier," the boy said quickly. "He had a ring earlier." Adrian smiled. Not at Ellis, but at Charles. "You see, he is inventing details now." "No," Ellis said. His voice cracked, but continued. "You had one. Gold. Black stone. You turned it inward when you came back to the lobby." Charles remembered the ring. Adrian wore their father's signet on business days, and removed it only when he wanted to appear less like an heir. "Where is it?" Charles asked. Adrian's smile faded by one careful degree. "I left it at home. You had it 20 minutes ago. You are taking jewelry testimony from a child who shines shoes." "Shoes are how I know people," Ellis said. The room changed around that sentence. Charles felt its truth before he understood why. Ellis was not guessing wealth. He studied the part of rich men closest to the ground. Celia returned with a printed sheet. "I obtained a preliminary activity summary," she said. "Not the full log." Charles held out his hand. The page showed his name, Eleanor's vault number, the scheduled appointment, and one impossible line, 8:41 a.m. Pre-access verification initiated. Charles had entered the bank at 9:06. Celia spoke before he could. "That does not mean the vault was opened. A pre-access verification can be administrative." "By whom?" "The system does not display that on a preliminary summary." "Convenient," Charles said. Adrian leaned back. "Or ordinary." "Charles, the bank called you because the account was dormant. Administrative triggers are not sinister." Charles looked at the empty envelope again. Its flap had been opened carefully, not torn. The glue line shone faintly, as if warmed and pressed back down. "Celia," he said, "I want the inventory record for every item placed in that vault. That will require a process. I heard you the first time." His phone vibrated. The message came from Dana Rusk, an attorney he had used only once, years earlier, because Adrian disliked her. "Send photos of everything. Do not let bank retain originals. Ask about sub-account, EW, -17. Charles had forgotten the name. EW -17 had been one of Eleanor's small charitable holding accounts, the kind she said did not need his attention. He photographed the key, the lace, the envelope, the picture, and the note on the back. Then he asked Celia, "What is EW -17? Adrian stood. "That is not relevant to this vault." Charles kept his eyes on Celia. "What is it?" Celia's face changed, just enough. "A legacy sub-account," she said. "Dormant, I believe." "For whom?" "I would need to verify." "Verify now," Celia typed. Adrian remained standing. Ellis watched. His polish box balanced on his knees. A minute passed. Then another. Celia finally said, "There were quarterly disbursements." "To whom?" She hesitated. "The memo field uses initials." Charles felt the air narrow. "What initials?" Celia looked at Adrian before she answered. "Hun, Huck." The two letters meant nothing to Charles. Charles looked at the back of the photograph again. Beneath Eleanor's warning, half hidden by Eleanor's thumb, was a printed street number on the brick wall. The last two digits were clear. 17. April 17. He hated how the number kept returning. No longer memory but breadcrumb. Dana texted again. N.H. Maybe protected minor. Get full beneficiary line. Charles read it, then slid the phone face down before Adrian could see. Then Ellis leaned forward, staring at the photograph. His finger hovered above the brick building behind Eleanor and the child. "That place," he said. Charles turned to him. "You know it?" Ellis nodded, but the color had left his face again. "That's Lark House," he said. "It's not a charity office." Adrian's voice sharpened. "Be careful." Ellis did not look at him this time. "It's where they send kids," he said, "when nobody is supposed to come looking." Lark House was not on the bank's directory. Dana Rusk found it through a licensing database, then through an older address attached to a youth placement contractor, then through a tax filing that used a different name. By the time Charles stepped out of Bell and Ames, she had already sent him 3 messages and 1 instruction. "Do not go alone." Charles looked at Adrian standing beneath the bank's stone awning, speaking quietly into his phone, as if the morning had become an inconvenience to be managed. Celia remained inside, preserving procedure, which meant keeping the full log away from him until someone above her decided how much truth was safe to release. "I'm not alone," Charles said when Dana called. "Your brother does not count." "I meant the boy." There was a pause. "Charles, I know." He did know. A 12-year-old Shoeshine boy was not a shield, a witness statement, or a strategy. Ellis should have been sent back to his grandmother with an apology and enough money to replace whatever tips he had lost. Charles even reached for his wallet. Ellis saw the movement and stepped back. "I didn't do it for that," he said. Charles stopped with his hand inside his jacket. The rebuke was quiet, but it landed harder than anger. Charles withdrew his hand empty. "I know," he said. Then, because that was not entirely true, he added, "I'm learning." Ellis looked away first. Dana met them 12 minutes later in a black coat, her hair clipped back, no briefcase, no jewelry except a watch with a cracked face. Charles had hired her once during a dispute over a museum acquisition. Adrian had called her abrasive. Eleanor had called her useful. Dana took one look at Ellis and then at Charles. "Tell me you did not bring a child from a bank lobby into a trust investigation." "He brought me," Charles said. Ellis did not smile this time. Lark House sat 4 blocks east of the courthouse in a narrow brick building with green doors and barred lower windows painted the same color as the trim. It did not look cruel. That was what troubled Charles. It looked maintained, regulated, and forgettable. A place designed not to raise questions. Inside, a woman at the front desk asked for identification before she asked why they were there. Her name badge read Mara Venn, Resident Coordinator. When Charles said Nora Hale, her face changed less than Celia's had, but enough. Nora is not available for outside visitation. Dana placed her card on the counter. We are not here for visitation. We are here because a trust account connected to Eleanor Whitaker appears to list Nora as a protected beneficiary. Mara Venn did not pick up the card. Financial claims involving minors must go through the county. Good, Dana said. Then you will have no problem telling the county we came before the account was altered again. The woman looked at Charles now. Mr. Whitaker, we are responsible for stability here. Nora has a history of reacting poorly to disruptions. Charles had heard that language in hospitals, schools, boardrooms, anywhere adults wanted obedience to sound like care. What kind of disruptions? He asked. False hopes, Mara said. A door opened at the end of the hall. A girl stood there with a sketchbook pressed against her chest. She was not the small child in the photograph, but Charles recognized the angle of her chin before he knew why. 15, maybe. Dark hair cut unevenly near her jaw, a grey sweater too large at the wrists, eyes that did not search the room for help because they had stopped expecting it. Nora, Mara said sharply, go back to group. Nora did not move. Her gaze went from Dana to Ellis, then to Charles. It settled on his face without warmth. You're him, she said. Charles felt the strange discomfort of being recognized by someone he had failed without knowing she existed. I'm Charles Whitaker. I know. Dana stepped forward gently. Nora, my name is Dana Rusk. We have questions about Eleanor Whitaker. At Eleanor's name, Nora's fingers tightened around the sketchbook. She said someone would come late, Nora said. I thought she meant a lawyer. Charles heard the accusation under the words. I found a photograph today, he said. You were in it. Nora's mouth hardened. Was my face still there? No one answered quickly enough. Nora nodded once, as if that confirmed something she had already known. Mara came around the desk. This conversation is inappropriate. No, Nora said. The word was small, but it stopped the adult walking toward her. Mara's expression shifted. Nora, you always tell me to use my words. Nora opened the sketchbook. I'm using them. She turned the pages with quick, guarded movements. Charles saw drawings of windows, doors, shoes, hands, a cracked fountain, the green front of Lark House. Then numbers, not written in lines, but hidden in the shadows of drawings, along roof edges and stair rails. EW-17 appeared in the side of a brick wall. April 17 was worked into the slats of a bench. A pattern of wedding lace had been copied around the border of a page so carefully that Charles felt his throat tighten. Eleanor taught you that? He asked. She taught me that grown-ups take papers, Nora said. But they don't always look at drawings. Ellis leaned closer before he remembered himself. That's smart. Nora looked at him for the first time with something less sharp than suspicion. It's tired. Charles accepted the correction in silence. Dana studied the page without touching it. Nora, do you have any letters from Eleanor? Mara answered first. Residents are not encouraged to keep attachments that complicate placement. Nora gave a flat laugh. That means yes. She reached into the back cover of the sketchbook and pulled at a strip of tape. A folded envelope slid out, soft from being opened and closed too many times. On the front, in Eleanor's handwriting, were 3 words. For when pressed, Nora did not hand it to Charles. She held it against her chest. Who pressed you? Dana asked. Nora looked past them toward the front window. A dark sedan had stopped across the street. Charles knew the car. Adrian's. Mara followed his gaze and went pale. Nora's voice changed, becoming lower, faster, older. He came last month. Not inside. He sent a man with papers. They said if I signed, I'd get moved somewhere better. Less rules. My own room. Did you sign? Charles asked. Nora looked offended. Eleanor told me never to sign anything with a blank second page. Charles closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor, still ahead of him, still doing the work he had not known needed doing. Nora slid the envelope back into the sketchbook. I mailed 1 copy to legal aid, she said. It came back undelivered. I gave 1 to Miss Venn's office. It disappeared, so I kept the ugly one. The ugly one? Ellis asked. The one with mistakes. Nora tapped the lace pattern on the page. People like clean proof. They throw away messy proof. So I made it messy. Dana looked at Charles, and he understood the warning in her eyes. Nora was not a symbol. She was a witness, a minor, and a child who had already learned to hide evidence from adults who smiled while taking it. Charles turned to Mara. No one moves her today. Mara recovered some of her authority. You do not have that right. Then I'll find who does. Nora stared at him. For the first time, there was something like interest in her face. Not trust. Not yet. Eleanor said you'd say that, she said. Charles felt the words strike deeper than he expected. What else did she say? Nora looked toward Adrian's car again. She said if you opened the vault after him, Nora answered, you were already in danger. Dana did not let Charles answer Nora right away. That was the first useful thing she did at Lark House. The second was stepping between Charles and the door before he could follow the shape of his anger into the street. You cannot take her, Dana said quietly. Charles looked past her to Nora, who had returned the envelope to the sketchbook and locked both arms around it. I was not going to. Yes, you were thinking about it. Don't. She is a minor in a licensed placement facility. If you make one wrong move, Adrian will turn this into attempted interference before dinner. Across the lobby, Mara Venn had recovered enough to begin speaking in procedural language again. Nora needed stability. Nora needed boundaries. Nora could not be exposed to unverified financial disputes. Every sentence sounded reasonable until Charles remembered that reasonable words had built the walls around the girl in the first place. Dana asked to photograph the pages Nora was willing to show. Nora refused at first. Then Ellis said, you can hold the book. She can photograph from far enough that nobody touches it. Nora considered him. You always solve things by not touching them. Ellis shrugged. I polish shoes. Touching wrong gets you yelled at. Something almost like agreement passed between them. Nora opened the sketchbook again, but only to 3 pages. The lace border, the bench slats hiding April 17, and a drawing of a narrow wooden cabinet with 2 doors and a cross carved into the top rail. Dana's eyes sharpened. Where is that? Nora closed the book. If I say, she'll write it down. Mara stiffened. Nora, that is unfair. No, Nora said. It's history. Charles looked at the drawing in Nora's hands. The cabinet was not a bank cabinet. It was old, handmade, the kind of thing a church might keep in a hall where volunteers folded donated clothes and old women saved keys in teacups. Eleanor had volunteered at 3 legal aid clinics, 2 hospitals, and a church Charles had donated to without ever visiting. He hated how quickly he knew which one mattered. Street Agnes, he said. Nora did not confirm it, but her grip changed. Dana saw it. We go there. Now. Mara moved toward the desk phone. I am required to report unscheduled contact that affects a resident's placement, then report it accurately, Dana said. A protected minor disclosed potential trust interference. We requested no removal, no signature, no transfer. Charles turned to Nora. No one is asking you to come. I know, Nora said. That's why I might believe you later. The sentence stayed with him all the way to Street Agnes. The church sat between a closed pharmacy and a tailor whose windows were filled with sun-faded suits. Charles had written checks to it for years. He had never noticed the cracked front steps, the loose railing, the donation box with tape over one corner. Money, he was learning, did not count as attention. A woman named Sister Margaret opened the side door after Dana knocked twice and showed her card. She was small, elderly, and unimpressed by Charles's last name. Eleanor's husband, she said, not as a question. Yes. You took your time. Dana looked at Charles but said nothing. Sister Margaret led them through a narrow hall smelling of lemon soap and old paper. Ellis walked last, carrying his Shoeshine box like a passport he did not trust anyone else to hold. At the end of the hall was a room with stacked blankets, metal folding chairs, and a wooden cabinet with a cross carved into the top rail. Charles took the brass key from his pocket. For the first time since the vault opened, his hand shook. The key fit. Inside the cabinet was not a treasure. It was a grey archival box, a cassette tape in a paper sleeve, and a bundle of photocopies tied with plain string. On top lay a note in Eleanor's handwriting. If this key reached Charles, assume the vault was touched first. Charles had to sit down. Dana did not give him long. She pulled on gloves from her coat pocket and opened the photocopies 1 page at a time. There were bank statements for EW-17, quarterly payments marked NH Continuity Care, receipts from Lark House, a letter to a probate judge requesting sealed review of a minor beneficiary pathway. A page with the name Clara Hale, underlined twice. Charles pointed to it. "Who is Clara?" Sister Margaret looked at him with something that was almost pity. "Nora's mother." The answer opened a door, but not the whole room behind it. "What happened to her?" Dana lifted one finger, stopping him before Sister Margaret could answer too much too fast. "We document first." The next page was a memo Eleanor had written but never sent. Parts were crossed out. Parts were rewritten in the margins. Adrian says discretionary control is temporary. Martin says the signatures are routine. Clara says the relief ledger is short again. I do not know which of them is lying yet. Charles read the paragraph twice. Martin. He knew that name. Martin Sloane had managed family trusts since before Eleanor died. A polite man with soft hands and sentences that seemed designed to end conversations. Dana photographed the memo. "This is helpful. It proves something. It proves Eleanor was suspicious before she died. It does not prove who stole from whom, or that the vault was entered illegally today." In the corner, Ellis stared at the cassette tape. "My grandma has a player," he said. Dana shook her head. "We do not play original evidence on a kitchen machine." "I didn't say we should." Ellis looked embarrassed. "I just mean people kept tapes when they wanted voices." Sister Margaret's expression changed. Charles noticed. "What?" The nun reached for the edge of the cabinet, then stopped as if asking permission from the past. "She came here the week before she died," Sister Margaret said. "Eleanor." She was frightened, though she would not use that word. She asked if a voice could be witnessed after the speaker was gone. Dana went very still. "Did she record something?" "I don't know," Sister Margaret said. "She left the tape sealed. That was when footsteps sounded in the hall. Not many. 2 men, maybe 3. Slow enough to suggest they believed they had a right to be there." Dana slid the box lid halfway closed. Charles moved toward the doorway, but Dana caught his sleeve. "Listen first," she whispered. Through the thin wall, Adrian's voice came clear enough to be recognized, not clear enough to catch every word. "Should never have kept the girl there," he said. Another voice answered, lower and drier. "Martin Sloane. Eleanor kept several sentimental projects. That does not make this one enforceable." You didn't see Charles's face. "I have seen grieving men before." "He's not grieving now," Adrian said. "He's looking." A third voice said something Charles could not make out. Then Martin again. "The vault gives him fragments. Fragments embarrass families. They do not win hearings." Dana's eyes flicked to Charles, warning him not to move. Adrian spoke more softly. "And the boy?" "A pause," Martin answered. "Children who work in lobbies are easy to discredit, especially when something is missing." Ellis's face drained of color. Charles felt a clean, cold anger rise in him, but Dana's hand tightened on his sleeve. The partial conversation moved away down the hall. A side door opened. Then the building breathed again. Charles turned to Ellis. The boy was staring at the floor, but not with shame this time, with understanding. "They're going to say I stole it," he said. No one corrected him. Dana opened the box again and looked at the sealed tape, the memo, the copied statements, the note Eleanor had left for a husband who had arrived years late and still nearly too late. "We have suspicion," she said. "We have motive. We have corroboration." Charles looked at the hallway where his brother's voice had disappeared, but not enough. Dana met his eyes. Not yet. Dana would not let anyone leave Street Agnes with the archive box under one arm. She called it evidence now. That changed the air around it. The grey cardboard box, the copies, the sealed cassette, even Eleanor's note became less like messages from a dead woman and more like objects that could be weakened by one careless hand. Sister Margaret signed a statement saying where the cabinet had been kept and who had opened it. Dana photographed the cabinet, the lock, the brass key, the tape sleeve, the string around the photocopies, and the dust line where the box had rested. Charles found the thoroughness almost cruel. He wanted to read everything. Dana made him wait. "Curiosity ruins chain of custody," she said. "I'm her husband. Then you should want this done correctly." He had no answer for that. Ellis stood near the door, watching Dana label a paper evidence bag. His shoeshine box sat by his feet. The longer he stood there, the younger he looked. Charles lowered his voice. "I can have someone take you home." Ellis shook his head. "My grandma will still be at the bank until 2. Then I'll have a car take you there." "No." The refusal came too fast. Ellis caught himself and looked embarrassed. "She doesn't like cars sent by people she doesn't know." Charles almost said that his driver could be trusted. Then he remembered how little that meant to people who had learned not to trust doors opened for them. Dana sealed the cassette in a padded envelope. "This goes to a forensic audio lab. Not to my office, Not to your house. Not to anyone Adrian can call as a favor. And the copies? My office. Then we file a preservation demand with the bank before they decide what their memory is. They left through the side entrance. The street outside looked ordinary enough to insult him. Delivery bikes. A woman carrying dry cleaning. A man feeding coins into a meter. Charles had spent years believing that disaster announced itself with alarms. Today it had come through velvet ropes, church cabinets, and polite people saying process. At Dana's office, nothing looked expensive. The carpet was clean but old. The chairs did not match. A framed certificate hung slightly crooked behind the reception desk. Charles felt more trust there than he had felt in the private bank. Dana's assistant scanned the documents, while Dana dictated a preservation notice. All logs, dual control records, video from lobby, vault corridor, consultation rooms, keypad activity, internal messages concerning vault 417, sub-account EW, -17, and any incident report involving Charles Whittaker, Adrian Whittaker, Ellis Cole, or unidentified minor witness. Charles looked up. Unidentified minor witness? That is how they will describe him before they describe him worse. Ellis sat straighter. I have a name, he said. I know, Dana said, still typing. That is why we use it first. The first response came from Bell and Ames within 19 minutes. Not from Celia, from compliance. The bank acknowledged receipt. The bank denied irregular access. The bank reserved all rights. The bank would conduct an internal review. The bank reminded Mr. Whittaker that unauthorized removal of vault contents could affect inventory integrity. Charles read the last line twice. They're saying I stole my own wife's things. Dana took the paper. They are saying they may need that argument later. The second response came from Martin Sloan. It was not addressed to Charles. It was addressed to Dana. Miss Rusk, any attempt to disturb long-settled Whittaker family instruments on the basis of emotionally charged materials of uncertain origin may expose your client to unnecessary reputational and legal risk. We strongly advise against contact with protected youth residents, former charitable recipients, or bank staff outside formal channels. Dana smiled without humor. That was fast. Charles felt a slow turn inside him. He knows about Nora. He knows enough to warn us away from her. Can he move her? Not directly. But people like Martin rarely need direct power. They know who signs forms. The assistant brought in the first scanned pages. Dana spread them across the desk, not as a story but as a field of possible traps. EW, -17 had been created 7 years before Eleanor died. Its stated purpose was continuity support for dependent minors affected by Whittaker-funded relief actions. That phrase meant almost nothing and too much at once. Quarterly payments began 2 months later. Most were small: tuition deposits, counseling invoices, transportation, clothing stipends. Then, 3 months after Eleanor's death, the payments changed. They no longer went directly to service providers. They routed through something called AW Discretionary Management. Charles stared at the initials, Adrian Whittaker. Dana tapped the page with a pencil. Maybe, or maybe not. Initials are not proof. You think that's accidental? I think Martin will say it is an administrative vehicle established to simplify disbursement after Eleanor's passing. He will say the payments continued. He will say no minor was harmed. He will say grief makes men assign malice to paperwork they do not understand. Charles looked away, because that last part was too close to what a room full of lawyers might believe. Ellis had been quiet for several minutes. Now he pointed at one scanned receipt. That stamp is wrong. Dana leaned closer. What stamp? The Larkhouse stamp. The one from last year is round. This one is square. Charles looked at him. Ellis shrugged, uncomfortable under the attention. My grandma gets receipts from places. Laundry, bank lobby, church pantry. Stamps change when offices change, but old stamps don't show up after new ones unless someone keeps one in a drawer. Dana studied the page. This receipt is dated after the round stamp begins. Then it's old paper, Ellis said. Or old lies. No one spoke for a moment. Dana made a note. Good. That is not proof, but it is a question worth asking. A question worth asking. Charles was beginning to understand the shape of the work. Not thunder, not revelation. Questions stacked until someone with power could no longer step over them. His phone rang. Adrian. Charles let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Then a text appeared. You are involving children in something you do not understand. Eleanor would be ashamed. Charles read it once, then showed Dana. She photographed the message. He used Eleanor's name again. He always does when he wants me smaller. Dana's assistant returned with another page. The bank sent a partial inventory scan. Dana took it. The scan showed the original contents of Eleanor's vault from the date it was opened. One photograph, one fabric-wrapped key, one sealed personal envelope, and one item described only as supplementary private declaration. The final line had a notation beside it. Client requested voice witness handling. Charles felt the words move through him like cold water. The cassette, he said. Dana's face tightened. Maybe. Or something connected to it. Then we have what she left. No, Dana said. We may have the copy of what points to what she left. Before Charles could answer, Ellis whispered, "Look at the bottom." At the bottom of the scan, beside the page number, was a timestamp. 8 Dima is TRMM. Not from the original inventory date. From that morning, Dana went still. Charles looked at the line again. 8:53 a.m. was 13 minutes after the pre-access verification and 13 minutes before Charles entered the bank. Dana printed the page twice. Now we have a bank record generated today for an inventory they claim has not been touched. Charles allowed himself one breath of hope. Then Dana's phone buzzed. She read the message, and her expression closed. "What?" Charles asked. "The bank has opened an incident report," she said. Ellis stood before she finished. Dana looked at him, then at Charles. Missing property from Vault 417. Potential witness contamination. Minor, present, during unauthorized handling. Ellis's hands curled around the strap of his polish box. "They did it," he said quietly. Charles looked at the boy, at the copied pages, at Eleanor's handwriting now turned into evidence no institution wanted to hold. Dana's voice was low. "They did not prove anything against him," she said, "but they just made him part of the case." For 37 minutes, the case seemed to choose a shape. Dana filed the preservation demand with the bank, then an emergency notice with probate court, then a letter to the county office responsible for Lark House placements. Her assistant moved from scanner to printer to phone, knowing paper could be a door if it reached the right desk first. By 4 o'clock, Bell and Ames acknowledged that the 8:53 inventory scan was genuine. Charles read the line twice, then once more to make the feeling last. Genuine. For the first time that day, the word stood on his side. Dana ruined it immediately. "Genuine only means the scan exists," she said. "It does not tell us why it was created, but it was created before I entered the bank." "Yes. And they said nothing had been touched." "Yes. Then they lied. They may say they were imprecise." Charles stared at her. Dana did not soften. "This is how it works. You want a clean word. They give you a dirty one and call it policy." Ellis sat near the window with a paper cup of water he had not touched. His grandmother had arrived 20 minutes earlier, a narrow woman named Ruth Cole with silver hair pinned tight. She had hugged Ellis hard enough to make him wince. Now she stood by the door, not trusting the office enough to sit. "They told me our stand is suspended," Ruth said. Charles turned. "Who told you?" "The bank. A woman from vendor relations. Said there was a security review." Ruth looked at her grandson. "They said Ellis entered a restricted client space. He was invited," Charles said. Ruth's eyes moved to him. "By you?" "Yes." "Then will you be the one paying our rent if they decide invited still means fired?" The question had no cruelty. That made it worse. Charles had been ready to say, of course. He stopped himself because Ellis was watching. Money could solve a bill and still steal dignity. "I will make it right," he said carefully, "in a way you approve." Ruth studied him, then gave one small nod. Dana's phone rang. She put it on speaker after seeing the number. "This is Dana Rusk." A woman's voice answered from the forensic audio lab. "We completed the intake review. The cassette is sealed and playable. We captured a short, non-destructive preview from the first recorded segment." Charles stood. Dana lifted a hand, warning him not to speak. "The voice is female," the technician continued. "Older adult, consistent with the sample provided for Eleanor Whitaker, pending formal comparison." Charles closed his eyes. Eleanor's voice existed in the world again. "What does she say?" Dana asked. The technician hesitated. "Very little in the preview. The first clear sentence is, 'If Charles hears this after the vault has been opened, then Adrian moved before I could stop him.' Then handling noise, and an incomplete phrase about Clara Hale and a ledger." Charles gripped the back of a chair. There it was. Adrian, Clara, ledger. Not everything. Enough. Dana thanked the technician and ended the call. Charles looked at her. "Now we have him." "No," she said. The answer came so fast it struck him. Dana. We have an unauthenticated preview from a cassette, not fully analyzed. We have a dead woman saying a name. We have no full context, no completed chain, no court order compelling acceptance. We have something powerful, not something safe. Ruth muttered. Rich people sure make truth work hard. Ellis glanced at her, startled and proud. Then the counterstrike arrived. It came in 3 parts. First, Bell and Ames sent an amended explanation. The 853 scan, they said, had been generated under a family office verification protocol requested by an authorized co-trustee representative. The vault had not been opened for client access. No contents had been removed by bank staff. Second, Martin Sloan sent a formal notice that Adrian Whittaker held limited administrative authority over certain dormant Whittaker instruments, including banking inventory coordination. Third, Mara Venn from Lark House emailed Dana a behavioral report. Nora Hale had allegedly become agitated after unauthorized visitors raised financial expectations. Staff found hidden documents in her personal belongings. Those materials had been secured. A temporary placement reassessment was being considered. Dana read the last sentence once, then printed it. Charles felt the false floor give way. They're moving her. Not yet, Dana said. They are preparing language that lets them move her. They took her documents. They will call it safeguarding. Ruth laughed once, without humor. I know that word. Ellis stood. We have to go back. No, Dana and Charles said at the same time. Ellis's face tightened. You said she was a witness. She is, Dana said. Then why does everyone get to take things from witnesses? No one answered immediately. Charles' phone rang. This time, he answered. Adrian's voice was calm. I hoped you would let this breathe before making it uglier. You sent them to Nora. I contacted appropriate parties after learning a vulnerable minor had been drawn into an adult dispute. You sent a man with papers last month. A pause. That is not accurate. It is Nora's. Nora is a troubled girl with a history of defensive storytelling. Eleanor cared about many people. It does not make every story law. Charles looked at Ellis, at Ruth, at Dana, at the copies spread across the desk. Why are you afraid of her? Adrian exhaled softly, almost sadly. I am afraid of what you will do to yourself, trying to turn Eleanor's guilt into a second family. The sentence was placed carefully. Charles felt its blur. Eleanor's guilt. Second family. Adrian was offering him jealousy. You think that will work on me? Charles asked. I think grief works on everyone. The line went dead. Dana had written down nearly every word. Charles set the phone on the table. He is going to say Eleanor was manipulated by Nora's mother. He already is, Dana said. Her assistant entered with another printout. This just came from Martin's office. Dana took it and read in silence. What is it? Charles asked. A release form. From whom? Dana looked at him. Nora. Ellis stepped forward. No. Dana held the page away from him, but not because he was wrong, because she needed to see it without hope in the way. The form stated that Nora Hale, through placement supervision, acknowledged receiving support from Eleanor Whittaker's charitable account and waived any further claim, expectation, or beneficiary interest connected to EW-17. At the bottom was a signature, Nora Hale. Dana looked at the second page, blank, except for a notary stamp and a date from last month. Charles heard Nora's voice again. Eleanor told me never to sign anything with a blank second page. She didn't sign this, he said. Dana was quiet. Say it. I believe she signed something, Dana said. I do not believe she signed what they attached it to. Ruth pressed a hand over her mouth. Ellis looked sick. Charles reached for the document, but Dana pulled it back. No, we do this clean. Clean? The word came out sharper than he meant. They are using a child's signature against her, and if you touch that page like a furious man, they will use you against her too. That stopped him. She was right. Adrian knew how to bait his grief and his shame. Dana placed the release form beside the bank scan, the inventory notation, Eleanor's memo, the Lark House receipt, and the photo of the scratched child. For a moment, the evidence looked like a path. Then it looked like a trap. We are close, Charles said, though he was unsure whether he meant truth or losing it. Dana looked at the release again. No, she said. Now they are close. To what? To making this look voluntary. Her phone buzzed one final time. A county caseworker had scheduled an emergency review of Nora's placement for the next morning. Reason: destabilizing outside influence and potential financial exploitation. Ellis sank back into his chair. Ruth put a hand on his shoulder. Charles looked at the words until they blurred, because rage had narrowed the room to one sentence. Outside influence. They had turned Eleanor's warning into an accusation, and by morning, they might turn Nora into someone unreachable. By sunrise, Charles had learned how slowly emergencies moved when the wrong people wanted them slow. Dana had filed the motion before midnight. The county portal marked it received. The probate clerk marked it pending. Lark House marked Nora's review urgent. Bell and Ames marked everything confidential. Every institution had a word for not moving. At 7:18 a.m., Charles stood outside the County Youth Services building with Dana, Ruth, and Ellis, under a sky the color of old paper. Ruth had made Ellis eat half a breakfast sandwich in the car. He held the other half now, wrapped in foil, forgotten in his hand. "You do not speak unless I ask you to," Dana told him. Ellis nodded. "And if anyone asks what you want?" He looked at Ruth, then at Charles. "I want them to stop saying I'm missing property." Ruth touched his shoulder. "Say it plainer." Ellis took a breath. "I want them to stop calling me a thief." Dana nodded. "Good. Plain is stronger." Inside, the review room looked like a place designed to remove heat from human situations. Beige walls, plastic chairs, a clock that ticked too loudly. Nora sat at one end of the table with Mara Venn beside her and a county caseworker across from them. Her sketchbook was not visible. Martin Sloan was there too. He wore a grey suit and no expression at all. Adrian had not come. That worried Charles more than his presence would have. The caseworker introduced herself as Miss Bell and began by reading the concern: destabilizing contact, possible financial exploitation, interference with placement services, unauthorized handling of documents. Nora kept her hands in her lap. Her eyes moved once to Charles, then away. Dana waited until the list ended. "We are requesting a temporary hold on any placement change and return of materials taken from Nora Hale." Mara folded her hands. No materials were taken. Personal items were secured after Nora became agitated. Nora spoke without looking up. "I asked for a receipt." Miss Bell looked at her. "For what?" "My own sketchbook." Mara's smile was patient. "Nora, we discussed this." "No, you discussed it while I was in the room." Charles felt Dana's foot touch his shoe under the table, warning him not to step in. Martin placed the release form on the table. "Before this becomes a performance, the record should reflect that Miss Hale previously acknowledged receiving charitable support and waived further expectations." Nora stared at the page. "That's my name," she said. "That isn't my paper." Martin's voice remained soft. "Young people often misunderstand administrative documents." Ruth made a sound in her throat. Ellis looked at her and stayed quiet. Dana slid forward her copy of the form. "The second page is blank except for the notary stamp and attachment. We are requesting preservation of the original." Martin's eyebrow moved slightly. "Miss Rusk, accusations of document fraud require more than dramatic suspicion." "Agreed," Dana said. "That is why we also have an audio intake preview from Eleanor Whitaker, bank timestamp discrepancies, a preserved church archive statement, and a minor witness who was named in a bank incident report after observing Adrian Whitaker near the vault corridor." "Minor witness," Martin repeated. "You mean the Shoeshine boy?" Ellis's ears reddened. Charles spoke before Dana could stop him. "His name is Ellis Cole." Miss Bell looked over her glasses. "Mr. Whitaker, this is not your turn." "No," Charles said. "It is his. And if this review is going to discuss him as a risk, then the record should state that I invited Ellis into the consultation room. I took the objects from the vault. I photographed them. Any claim that he contaminated evidence because he is poor enough to be convenient is false." The room held that for a moment. Not silence. Wait. Dana exhaled slowly through her nose, which was as close as she came to approval. Martin leaned back. "This is exactly the kind of emotional overcorrection that concerns us." Charles looked at him. "Who is us?" Martin did not answer. The caseworker turned to Nora. "Nora, do you feel unsafe because of Mr. Whitaker's contact?" Nora studied Charles with a care that made him uncomfortable. "No," she said. "I feel unsafe because people keep moving papers after I sign them." Mara's face tightened. "That is not fair." Nora reached into her sleeve. Everyone at the table reacted. Not dramatically, but enough. She stopped. "It's paper," Dana said. "Slowly, Nora." Nora pulled out a folded strip, small enough to have been hidden inside the cuff of her sweater. The edges were soft from sweat and wear. She placed it on the table but kept 2 fingers on it. "When the man came last month, he wanted me to sign a housing preference form," she said. "I knew the second page was wrong because it didn't have the staple holes, so I made the ugly copy before I signed anything." Dana leaned forward. What is this? The first page they showed me. The real one. On the strip was the top half of a document. Larkhouse Resident Education and Housing Preference. Nora's signature appeared at the bottom of the visible section, but the bottom corner had 3 dots drawn in ink. Nora pointed to them. Eleanor told me if someone made me sign something, mark the page where they wouldn't notice. 3 dots means check the next page. Miss Bell looked at the release form again. The notary page had no dots. For the first time, Martin reached for the document too quickly. Dana put her hand over it first. No. The caseworker's expression changed. Bureaucracy did not become courage, but sometimes it became caution. I am placing a temporary hold on any transfer, Miss Bell said. 24 hours. Mara began to object. Miss Bell raised one hand. Return the sketchbook to my custody, not Larkhouse custody. Nora's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Charles did not call it victory. He had learned better. Outside the building, Dana finally let herself move fast. We have 24 hours, she said. Maybe less if Martin gets to a judge first. What do we need? Charles asked. The full tape, the full bank log, the original notary record, and someone inside Bell and Ames who is more afraid of prison than Adrian. Charles looked across the street. A black sedan sat near the curb, not Adrian's. But when the rear window lowered, he saw Celia Mercer inside, pale and rigid. She did not wave. She only held up a white envelope, then placed it on the seat beside her. Dana murmured, "That may be our someone." Before Charles could cross, the sedan pulled away. On the sidewalk where it had been parked, something white slid against the curb in the wind. Ellis ran first. Charles shouted his name, but the boy was already kneeling, one hand on the envelope, before it could blow into the street. He brought it back carefully, holding the corners the way Dana handled evidence. On the front, in neat block letters, was one sentence. Ask why Celia logged out at 8:52. At 10:12 a.m., Dana filed for an emergency trust hearing. At 10:26, Charles called Naomi Keene, chair of the Bell and Ames Risk Committee, and one of the few people in private banking who did not owe Adrian a favor. At 10:41, Naomi called back and said 3 words Charles had not expected to hear from a bank. Send me everything. By noon, they were in a small probate courtroom that smelled of toner, varnish, and raincoats. The judge had allowed limited emergency argument because Nora was a minor, because the county had paused transfer only temporarily, and because the bank's own records now contradicted the bank's statements. Adrian arrived with Martin. Celia arrived alone. Her face looked smaller without the armor of her bank office. The judge began with rules. No speeches, no accusations without foundation, no use of Nora as a symbol. Charles found himself grateful for that last one. Dana built the case in pieces. First, the vault. She showed the 841 pre-access verification, then the 853 inventory scan, then the bank's first denial, then the amended explanation. Naomi Keene, appearing remotely, confirmed that a family office verification could be requested by a co-trustee representative but should not generate a fresh inventory scan without dual employee identification. Who was logged in? The judge asked. Naomi looked down at something off-screen. Celia Mercer initiated the session. She logged out at 8:52. The second employee credential was entered under a temporary override. The judge turned to Celia. Whose override? Celia's lips parted. Martin spoke first. Your Honor, internal banking credentials are outside the scope of this emergency matter. The judge looked at him. Not anymore. Celia swallowed. Mr. Sloan requested the review through Mr. Adrian Whitaker's authority. I was told the family wanted a pre-inventory before Mr. Charles Whitaker arrived to reduce distress. Were contents removed? Dana asked. Celia looked at Adrian. The judge said, Answer the lawyer. I did not remove contents. That was not the question, Dana said. Were contents removed? Celia's voice thinned. An envelope was taken from the shelf. Adrian's face did not change. Charles felt the answer strike him, but he did not move. Dana had told him before they entered, Let facts do what anger cannot. Second, Dana played the certified audio transfer. The lab had delivered it 40 minutes earlier. Eleanor's voice came thin but clear through the courtroom speakers. If Charles hears this after the vault has been opened, then Adrian moved before I could stop him. Clara Hale found the relief ledger short twice. Martin called it rounding. Adrian called it discretion. I call it theft until proven otherwise. If a release appears with Nora's signature, check the second page. They used blanks before. The judge stopped the recording there. Martin stood. That statement is prejudicial and untested. Dana said, "It is offered for emergency preservation and protective action, not final liability." The judge nodded. Limited purpose accepted. Third, Dana placed Nora's hidden page beside the release form. 3 dots, no dots, different staple holes. A notary page dated last month attached to a document Nora said she had never seen. The judge asked Nora one question only. "Did you intend to waive any interest connected to Eleanor Whitaker?" Nora sat with Dana beside her and Ellis behind her, Ruth's hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "No," Nora said. "I thought I was asking not to share a room with a girl who stole my shampoo." For the first time that day, the courtroom nearly became human. The judge looked back down before anyone could smile too long. Fourth, Ellis testified, not like a hero, like a boy who wished he was somewhere else. He described the mirror, the handkerchief, the ring turned inward, Adrian's jacket held closed. He admitted what he could not see. He said he had guessed wrong about metal dust and did not know what was in the envelope. Dana let him say all of that because truth with limits sounded different from a rehearsed lie. Martin tried to make him smaller. "You polish shoes for tips, correct?" "Yes, sir." "You depend on wealthy clients being pleased with you." "I depend on doing the job right." "Yet you inserted yourself into a private family matter." Ellis looked at Charles, then at the judge. "I saw a man wipe his hand after coming from where he said he wasn't. I told the person who was about to get hurt. That's not family, that's looking." The judge wrote something down. Finally, Charles spoke. He did not defend himself well. That surprised him. The truth made him look negligent before it made him look righteous. He admitted signing temporary co-trustee authority after Eleanor's death. He admitted allowing Adrian and Martin to handle accounts he should have read. He admitted that if Ellis had not stopped him, he might have opened the vault, grieved over strange objects, and gone home confused enough for Adrian to explain everything away. "I was easier to manage than I want to admit," Charles said. "My wife knew it. My brother used it. Nora paid for it." Adrian rose then. "Your Honor," he said, "my brother is in pain. He is constructing a conspiracy from grief, old charity records, and the influence of an attorney known for theatrical filings. Eleanor was compassionate, sometimes excessively so. She attached herself to broken people. Clara Hale was one of them. Nora is another. That does not create a legal claim." Dana opened a final folder. "No," she said, "but this does." She handed the clerk a bank transfer authorization from 6 weeks after Eleanor's death. AW Discretionary Management had received the first redirected EW-17 payment. The approval line carried Adrian's digital authorization and Martin's administrative certification. Beside it was Celia's credential entry, and beneath that, in the bank's own metadata, was a notation that had not appeared in the printed copy. "Minor beneficiary status, active. Do not merge without court review." Naomi Keene closed her eyes on the screen. The judge read the line twice. Then he looked at Adrian. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "I strongly suggest you sit down." Adrian did. The order was temporary, but it landed like stone. Nora's placement could not be changed without court approval. The release form was suspended pending forensic review. EW-17 and related accounts were frozen. Bell and Ames was ordered to preserve all logs, video, and employee communications. Adrian, Martin, and Celia were barred from access to any instruments involving Nora Hale until further order. Charles did not feel victory. He felt the weight of how close they had come to losing a girl behind paperwork. As the hearing adjourned, Nora passed him without stopping. Then she turned back. "Eleanor said you were slow," she said. Charles nodded. "She was right." Nora looked at him for another second, "but she said you could learn." Then she walked out with Dana. The formal review came 3 weeks later, in a larger room with microphones, nameplates, and people who had spent their careers believing polished institutions could not look guilty if everyone used the right tone. This time, Ellis Cole was not listed as a minor present during unauthorized handling. He was listed as a witness. Nora Hale was not described as disruptive, unstable, or financially influenced. She was listed as a protected beneficiary. Charles sat behind Dana while Bell and Ames presented its internal findings. Celia Mercer had violated dual control procedure. Martin Sloan had misrepresented the scope of Adrian's authority. Adrian Whitaker had directed a pre-inventory review while failing to disclose an active minor beneficiary. The release form attached to Nora's signature had been referred for criminal investigation. So had the redirected payments. None of the language sounded dramatic. That made it heavier. Institutions did not shout when they turned on the people who had used them. They recorded, certified, referred, suspended, and preserved. For the first time, Charles understood why Eleanor had worked so hard to leave more than one kind of proof. When it was his turn, he stood. He did not thank the committee for correcting itself. He did not perform outrage. He looked at Nora, then at Ellis and Ruth. "My wife saw what I did not," he said. "A child in a lobby saw what I did not. A girl everyone called difficult protected evidence better than the adults paid to protect her. I signed too much. I trusted convenience. I let grief make me useful to people who wanted silence." Adrian stared at the table. Charles did not look away from the record keeper typing every word. "Put that in the transcript," he said. Spring came slowly that year. Not beautifully. Not like forgiveness in a painting. It came with wet sidewalks, late buses, court dates, therapy appointments Nora sometimes attended and sometimes refused, and bank investigators calling Dana at hours that made her mutter into her coffee. Nora did not move into Charles's house. She had been asked, carefully, with Dana present and Ruth sitting in the corner, pretending not to listen. Nora had looked at the floor for a long time before saying she was tired of adults changing her address and calling it care. Charles accepted that. It was one of the first useful things he did without trying to improve it. The court appointed an independent guardian. EW-17 was restored under supervision. Lark House lost its contract pending review, and Nora moved into a smaller transitional home where she had her own desk, a lock that worked, and a caseworker who gave receipts for everything. Charles visited on Saturdays if Nora agreed by Thursday. Some Thursdays she did not. On those weeks, he stayed home and read Eleanor's old files instead of sending gifts. He was learning the difference between being available and being owed. Ellis returned to school full-time after Ruth's contract was restored, though not at Bell and Ames. Ruth said she had no interest in polishing the flaws of people who apologized only after lawyers arrived. Charles helped her secure a stand in the courthouse lobby, but only after Ruth reviewed the lease herself and made Dana explain every line. Ellis still shined shoes on Saturdays. He also spent 2 afternoons a week with a cobbler named Mr. Alvarez, learning how to repair leather instead of only making it presentable. Charles had offered to pay tuition for a private academy. Ellis had listened politely, then asked whether rich schools had mirrors near the lobby. Charles had said he did not know. "Then maybe later," Ellis said. The cassette took months to process fully. The final transcript helped reopen questions around Clara Hale's death and the relief ledger, but it did not bring back the years Nora lost or the years Charles spent sleeping inside his own ignorance. Martin was charged first. Celia cooperated. Adrian fought everything. That, too, was part of the ending. One Saturday in April, Nora asked to see the vault. Charles almost said no. Then he realized no was fear wearing the clothes of protection. So he took her, with Dana's approval, Ruth's warning, and Ellis's insistence on coming because banks behave better with witnesses. The vault felt smaller now. The shelf had been cleared, inventoried, photographed, and sealed again. On it sat the brass key wrapped in Eleanor's torn wedding lace, the empty envelope, and the photograph with Nora's scratched face. A forensic restorer had offered to repair the image. Nora had refused. "Leave it," she said. Charles understood, though it hurt to. Some things did not need to be made clean to be true. Nora touched the edge of the photograph, not her own face, but Eleanor's hand on her shoulder. "She told me you were slow," Nora said. "You mentioned that. She also said slow people sometimes stay." Charles did not answer quickly. He had learned not every silence was a failure. Some were rooms people needed before they could decide where to stand. "I can try," he said. Nora nodded, accepting neither too much nor too little. Outside the vault, Ellis waited by the velvet rope with his polish box at his feet. He looked older than he had the first morning, though not enough for Charles to forgive the world for it. "Did it open right this time?" Ellis asked. Charles looked back once at the steel door. "Yes," he said. "This time, it opened for the right people." April 17 came a week later. Charles did not spend it alone. He did not call it a celebration. Nora would have hated that. Ellis brought sandwiches wrapped in foil. Ruth brought coffee strong enough to make Dana blink. They sat in the small garden behind street. Agnes, near the cabinet room where Eleanor had left the key. No one made a speech. Near sunset, Nora took out her sketchbook and drew the brass key without the lace. Then she drew the lace beside it, separate, but not lost. Charles watched the page take shape. For 11 years, April 17 had been a number he avoided. Now it was still painful, but it was no longer only a code. It was a door Eleanor had left behind. And at last, Charles had learned to knock before opening.